trying to keep up with all the global shifts, it can feel overwhelming, right?
Especially with complex stuff like international trade, manufacturing.
Exactly. And that's what we're diving into for you today. The big question: can India actually become Apple's next huge manufacturing base, kind of like China is now?
It's a massive question.
We're looking at an article from April 16th, 2025 that digs into this. And importantly, it looks at more than just, where the iPhones get put together.
Right, it's about the whole picture, the entire system behind it.
So our mission for you here is to unpack all of that. Why is Apple looking so hard at India? What's the iPhone situation there now? And crucially, what are the big hurdles India needs to overcome to, well, maybe replicate what China did?
Yeah, the challenges are significant.
By the end, you should have a much clearer view of this whole evolving global trade story. Okay, so let's jump in.
Let's do it.
The article kicks off with a pretty striking prediction. Analysts think India could eventually make, get this, 50% of the world's iPhones.
50%. That's huge.
Yeah. Especially when you think back in 2017, it was basically nothing. So what's driving this potential massive shift?
Well, it seems like you've got a few big things converging. Geopolitics are shifting. Companies like Apple need to diversify their supply chains away from just one place.
Makes sense. De-risking.
Exactly. And then you have India's own economic situation, its own dynamics, all playing a part.
It does make you wonder, though, why not just bring it all back to the U.S.? Wouldn't that, solve some of these geopolitical headaches?
Well, reshoring. It sounds simple, but for something like an iPhone, it's really not straightforward.
Why is that?
The article points out just how complex the iPhone is. We're talking components sourced from over 40 different countries. 40.
Wow, okay, that's a lot more spread out than I might have guessed.
It really is. And putting it all together needs more than just factories. It needs a gigantic trained workforce. Plus, this dense network of specialized suppliers, all located near each other.
Right, the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And the U.S., well, it just doesn't have that ecosystem at the necessary scale right now. Not for something like the iPhone.
So you can't just, flip a switch and build it overnight?
Not at all. Yeah. Rebuilding that entire supply chain in the U.S., it would take years. Probably many years. And the cost.
Oh
Boy.
Yeah, I bet.
The article gives an estimate for you listening. An iPhone made stateside could cost maybe 5 times more than one made in China currently.
5 times. Okay, that puts things into perspective.
It really does. And explains why, the article mentions around 80% of Apple's products are still made in China.
The inertia, the existing setup, it's powerful.
Immensely powerful. But with trade tensions and everything else changing, Apple is clearly looking hard at alternatives. And that's where India really comes into the picture for you.
Okay, so what makes India the attractive alternative right now?
Well, first off, there's a pretty compelling cost angle. The article reports that after recent tariff changes, iPhones shipped from India to the U.S. are actually about 20% cheaper than those coming from China.
20% cheaper. That's significant. That's real money for Apple.
Absolutely. On top of that, India has this huge labor pool, and it's relatively cost-effective, which is obviously key for assembly work.
Right.
Plus, and this is important for you to note, India itself is a growing market for iPhones. So Apple has an incentive to produce there for the local market, too.
Okay. So it's not just about exporting. They've already had some success selling iPhones in India, haven't they?
They have, yeah. They've been building their presence there. And look, the numbers show the shift is already happening. The article says around 20% of Apple's global iPhone production already comes from India now.
20%. That's up from basically zero just a few years back. That's fast.
Incredibly fast.
Yeah.
And you see major players making moves. Foxconn, Apple's main partner, they've set up huge factories, planning more expansion.
Right.
And interestingly, Indian companies are stepping up too, like Tata Electronics. They've taken over facilities from Wistron and Pegatron. They're becoming major iPhone suppliers themselves.
So the assembly piece is definitely ramping up in India. But the article then draws a really important line, doesn't it?
It does. It makes this crucial distinction for you. Assembling the final product is one thing. Designing it, innovating, making the core high-value components, that's a whole different ballgame.
And that's where India might lag behind.
That seems to be the crux of it. The article suggests India's innovation pace isn't quite there yet. And crucially, it doesn't really control those high-end parts of the supply chain. The really valuable bits.
So even if loads of iPhones, say, assembled in India for you, if the brains, the key chips, the advanced screens are still coming from elsewhere, India's role is, well, still limited in a way.
Precisely. It's like Without owning more of that stack, as the article puts it, India remains sort of a component within Apple's system rather than driving it.
Okay.
And there's some macro data in the article to back this up for you. Private investment in India, around 11% of GDP, R&D spending, just 0.6% of GDP.
How does that compare to China, for instance?
Significantly lower. China's R&D spending is closer to 2.6% of GDP. That's a big gap when you're talking about fostering innovation.
Yeah, quite a difference for you to consider.
And the article mentions other challenges too, things you need to be aware of. Logistics can still be tricky, taxes can be high, sometimes policy isn't consistent, and there's still this issue of skilled talent leaving the country, the brain drain.
Right, so assembly is happening, it's growing fast, but the bigger goal for India really has to be moving up that value chain.
Exactly. Capturing more of the design, the R&D, the high-value manufacturing, that's the ultimate prize, beyond just assembly.
Now, this is where the article brings in a really fascinating historical parallel for you. It compares this situation to the US-Japan trade issues back in the 80s. Walk us through that comparison.
Yeah, this is quite insightful, looking at how past trade frictions played out. So back in the 1980s, Japan was, this economic powerhouse. Cars, electronics, semiconductors, they were dominating.
And that caused tension with the US.
Big time. Major trade friction. The U.S. took action. Do you remember any things like the voluntary export restraints on Japanese cars? Basically limiting how many cars Japan could sell in the U.S.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
And then came the Plaza Accord in '85. That deliberately strengthened the Japanese yen, making Japanese exports more expensive globally. Put a lot of pressure on Japan.
Okay, so Japan was under pressure. How did they react? And how does that connect for you to Apple in India today?
Well, Japan's response is really relevant here. To keep access to the huge U.S. market and, frankly, to ease the political pressure, what did Japanese companies do? They started building factories in the United States.
Ah, okay. If you can't beat them, join them, kind of. Build where you sell.
Sort of, yeah. It maintained market access, addressed the trade deficit concerns, created U.S. jobs. It was a strategic pivot.
So the parallel is, Apple looking at India isn't just about cheaper labor, it's a strategic diversification. A way to de-risk, relocate some production quickly, maybe anticipate future trade pressures, similar to how Japan reacted.
That's the connection the article draws for you. It's strategic preparedness in a world where trade rules feel like they're constantly shifting. It's not just Apple either.
Right, the article broadens out here.
Yeah, it suggests globalization itself is being, quote, rewritten. It's not the old model anymore.
What does that look like, this rewritten globalization?
Well, think about startups that are global from day one, or Chinese sellers using TikTok to sell directly to U.S. consumers, bypassing traditional retail entirely. Or even things like stablecoins, potentially changing how international payments work.
And maybe more politically driven trade alliances.
Exactly. All these shifts are happening. So Apple moving into India, you have to see it in that bigger context. It's about positioning for this new, maybe more fragmented, more volatile global trade landscape.
And for India, this is a massive opportunity, right? To become a truly significant global manufacturer in this new era.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
A huge opportunity.
It really does feel like we're at one of those turning points. The article mentions past disruptions, the dot-com crash, the 2008 crisis, COVID, how they all reshaped the global order.
And the argument is, global trade might be going through a similar fundamental shakeup right now for you. Old patterns are breaking down, new ones are forming.
And that leads to the article's pretty bold closing statement for you. In the coming years, there's a good chance that most of the iPhones might say, made in India.
It's a strong prediction, emphasizing just how significant this assembly shift could become.
So let's try and wrap this up for you. The key takeaway seems to be, yes, India is rapidly becoming a major iPhone assembly hub. That shift is real, it's happening fast.
Definitely. The numbers bear that out.
But becoming the next China, that's a much bigger leap. It means tackling those hurdles in innovation, getting control of the high-value parts of the supply chain, sorting out investment, R&D, logistics.
All those deeper challenges, yes. It's not just about assembly lines.
And it's crucial for you to remember this isn't happening in a vacuum. It's all tied up with these bigger shifts in geopolitics and how global trade works now. It's a moving target.
Absolutely. The landscape is constantly changing.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you to chew on. Thinking about that history with Japan adapting to trade pressures and seeing the global landscape shifting like it is now, what do you think is the single biggest factor, just one, that will decide if India truly becomes a global manufacturing force that goes way beyond just assembly? What's the linchpin?